Well, welcome everybody. I guess we could call this officially our second in the COVID safe and accessible elections campaign video series. This session is being taped. We will be mounting it for folks to be able to view on demand from our website, the elections section on the MNL site. So if there are friends that you have, members of council perhaps, that aren't free to be watching this live, ample opportunity for them to pick it up later. We'll endeavor to get it up on the site within the next couple of days. Oh, and I see still more in the waiting room, golly. Anyhow, I'm going to start slide sharing and introduce our other presenters. Here we go. Oops. There we go. Wonderful. All right. So our voters list. This session was meant to more or less coincide with when it was that we knew that Elections NL would be in a position to start actually responding to requests from municipalities on the voters list that you can get from them. And wonderful news, although we set this one back a little bit in our original schedule, that is something that is actually just starting this week, which you're going to be hearing a little bit more about. But the gathering today, we've got two expert support people here. Chris Foley, who's the voter registry manager from Elections NL, and Sean Murray, who's the director of research and quality assurance with the Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner for the province. Two folks to speak to key elements of voters list considerations and preparation. And then, of course, we've got all of you, because this is actually a bit of an opportunity for you to share your experience. We know everybody starts from different places in developing their lists. So this is going to be a time where we can sort of talk through a variety of scenarios for how you may be planning to approach updating yours. So as part of this process, of course, most of you will be familiar. Our first webinar treated vote by mail as the option that is available to us under the Municipal Elections Act, and in fact, the only one that really responds to all of the scenarios that we have under alert levels such as 4 and 5, the sorts of things that we're seeing happening up right now in central Newfoundland, unfortunately. So we have partnered ourselves, municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, with the professional municipal administrators, and are very much advocating that people consider going for the vote by mail. This approach, of course, Municipal Affairs has also come out noting that this is available as an option and laying out the steps that you need to take. They, of course, also highlight that it's not been broadly used before. So the example that, of course, many of us are going from right now is the circumstance in the city of St. John's, which, of course, is the largest community by far in this province, so not necessarily the best benchmark relative to the needs of smaller communities. So we're very much looking at trying to contextualize vote by mail for the circumstances of smaller communities. The campaign that we're undertaking is essentially a coordinated countdown to Election Day, September 28th. We are going to be providing resources and supports using our website. Hope most of you have visited it by now. We're once again providing group purchasing assistance on the types of election materials that we normally provide supports on. But this time around, we're also looking into the voter kit production and the particular arrangements with printers regionally around the province for that. And we're also seeing this as an opportunity to test drive, if you will, the underutilized option of vote by mail in the current version of the Municipal Elections Act. We are expecting that the Act is going to be reviewed before too long. We certainly know the Provincial Elections Act is about to be, and there can't help but be trickle down, we would assume, from that process as well. So this is kind of where we left off the last time. The first webinar on the vote by mail, we reviewed the sort of the process very briefly. We've done several presentations about that. We are currently at the stage of working on the template regulation that will soon be available on our website. We'll be consulting this week with Municipal Affairs in order to fine tune the draft documents that we've got. And here we are timeline-wise. Municipal Affairs has begun to provide a little bit more information about their expectations vis-a-vis the vote by mail end of the process, particularly the turnaround time that they expect they will need in order to review said regulations in particular. So whereas the Act couches everything in 60 days before the actual election date, we are now actually looking at June as being a really key month for everybody in terms of finalizing the procedures and regulations that are required specific to the vote by mail. So if you are going that route, keep that in mind. We'll be bringing on other supports, but as you can see, the voters list now is very much in play, the topic for us here today. And this remains a campaign that we're really grounding in ideas of accessibility. The vote by mail does open up a lot of additional opportunities for people to be able to exercise their franchise and to overcome barriers for many voters. The procedural content. There's going to be additional information coming down the line on that as well. These are also elements that are going to have to be sorted out in very short order now, especially with respect to allowing for time for the department to review materials. Again, MNL is working on templates, and we also, of course, now have the benefit of Municipal Affairs' own materials. They just last night would have pushed out a circular, I believe, to most every one of you that is directing you to now visit the main website with all of the election guidance materials for election staff. So bit of good news there, and something we expect everybody will want to jump off this call and take a look at if you haven't already. And on the access front, this is going to be the next, well, actually, I shouldn't say it's going to be the next webinar in the series, because we probably will wind up doing one on the regulations now before we do this one. It was originally to be the next one in the series, but this is also a period of time where there are some things for you to be taking into consideration regarding the access provisions for your election, particularly with respect to the opportunity to use vote by mail and get ballots in the hands of as many people as possible. So how do we do our voters lists? I'm sure we've got some in the audience that are more experienced municipal staff, been around for a few rodeos, and who actually have an old one that they're starting with. We're hearing that from a number of our members. We also, on the other end of the spectrum, know that there's a good bit of turnover in our sector between election periods. So we've got a lot of people, I'm sure, that are on the call that may have absolutely no idea at this stage in the game exactly what they're going to do first. So hopefully we'll have a few of your questions answered by the time we're done today. We have the option that has existed in times past, but that we kind of forget about these days, which is actually doing our own enumeration in communities. And I know of at least a couple of towns in the province that are going to be doing their own survey work in conjunction with the voter list updating this year, particularly because it's a census year, so it's a really good opportunity to benchmark a lot of your data. And of course, we actually have among the larger municipalities in the province a fair bit of contracting out happening, engagements with organizations like DataFix that are known, nationally for their election support services. But contractually, we had this conversation in our first webinar about the vote by mail undertaking and how the city of St. John's pursues it, and they do work with DataFix, but of course there are costs associated with that. So significant cost benefit circumstances, but it is definitely a service that bundles everything, including the preparation of a voters list, under the one price tag. So in thinking about our options, the one that many of you probably are familiar with, because as I understand it, there are actually 272 of our municipalities in the province currently that actually have signed information sharing agreements with Elections NL. So this is where I'm going to actually hand off to Chris, who as the voter registry manager for Elections NL has everything you need to know about dealings with Elections NL on getting a starter list. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. So as you mentioned, if you just want to back up a slide there.
Whoops, apologies.
Yeah, as mentioned, in order for obviously Elections NL to provide your municipality with elector information, we'd require that your municipality enter into an information sharing agreement with Elections NL. Those ISAs, as it states here, set forth all of the terms and conditions. Obviously, there's a lot of legal jargon in there, and however, I'd greatly suggest that you review the ISA, really every year, but in the event of any by-elections that come up, but certainly in an election year. And I understand that you guys are well aware of your timelines and understand that the ISA is required. And as they stand right now, the ISA, once you sign it, it's good for a term of 5 years. However, if there's any changeover in normally it's the town clerk that will, or someone of that at that level, who is the recipient of the list. If there's any turnover or changeover in that position, we'd require that schedule be re-signed in order to bring the ISA up to current standing. And the ISA also, as I mentioned, it sets forth various security measures that we would require, or that we would hope that the municipality has in place in order to protect the integrity of the list. Non-disclosure rules in there as well, which speaks to who's receiving the list and who you're allowed to provide it to, authorized individuals. And of course, any sort of limits on what the list can be used for. And obviously, under the ISA, the lists and the data contained within it can only be used for the purpose of facilitating your elections. So how do you obtain a list of electors? Well, apparently there's a lot of you that know how to obtain one, because my inbox continues to fill up every day with requests of when can we get it, and when are we going to get it, and how soon can we expect it. So obviously 2021 was a bit of a different year in the elections world in the province, and that's a bit of an understatement. However, it kind of altered our timelines. Normally we take about a 6-year period, or a 6-week period. It'd be nice to have 6 years, but a 6-week period to do the work that's required to get the list, any sort of updates that we receive from Vital Stats. We kind of base our whole business cycle on the April 1 annual list that we're required to provide to the provincial registered parties in the province. And so we usually, like I said, we take about a 6-week period leading into that to get everything ready. And sometimes that might involve identifying who's receiving the list because, you know, like municipalities, parties have turnover as well. And so it's just, it's, the minutia of identifying people, but also integrating all of the updates, making sure that the Vital Stats updates, your legal name changes, your deceased, all of those are corrected and removed from the list where necessary. And so this year was a bit of a different year in that we didn't finish up the provincial election until very late in March, almost early April. And so we figured we'd need that 6 weeks. We also notified the provincial parties as well and let them know that it would be about a 6-week period before we'd be able to fulfill that annual list requirement. And so they were provided a copy of the list yesterday. And so now just this morning, we're just working on working up the lists for the municipalities that have already requested it. So just some key points to remember here on this slide is that it's really, there's no big application procedure or it's a lot of red tape. It's basically you contact our voter registry unit, which at the moment is Margie Kennedy and Judy Lockyer. The two of them have, and you've probably heard those names over the years, for those of you who have been with municipalities for some time. And, they've been with the office since the voter registry unit was created in 2007, which was the last time that the province completed a provincial enumeration. And so once the voter registry unit was created, the thought was that there would be no more requirement for provincial enumeration, even though if you read the antiquated Elections Act, the enumeration clause is still in there. So, hopefully in the next iteration of the Elections Act, that will be updated to reflect more of that the voter registration process now is an ongoing day-to-day function of the office, as opposed to a 5-year enumeration based process. So your first point of contact, other than myself, because my email obviously is out there, and my phone number, my 2 phone numbers, you can contact Margie Kennedy or Judy Lockyer, and they'll be more than helpful or more than happy to help you guys with your requirements. They'll have some initial questions for you, in terms of what criteria you're looking for, because 2017 is a little different now than what we're looking at in 2021 in terms of connecting with or providing electors at the municipal level. Well, St. John's has been doing it for a while and a couple of other municipalities, but for municipalities now looking at potentially using the mail-in vote option, your criteria may change from just not requesting a civic address, but also a civic and a mailing address. So they'll probably want to clarify that with you guys to make sure we're providing you with the information you need. And also just making sure that ISAs, they will pull the ISA. They each have assigned 130 odd or 140 odd municipalities each. So they pull your ISA, make sure it's up to date, and that the correct, as I mentioned on the first slide there, that the town clerk or whoever it is at that level is on the schedule. And yes, so the third part is I just talked about in terms of, municipalities should indicate what's required. So I mentioned civic and or mailing data, but another issue is, whether some municipalities, and I'll speak to my own. I live in the community of Bay Roberts, and we have a couple of other, neighboring municipalities, or not municipalities, but communities that fall under the municipality of Bay Roberts. So Coley's Point, Shearstown, Butlerville. These are communities that when we search for that data in our system for the municipality of Bay Roberts, we're only going to pull out Bay Roberts. So it needs to be specified. If you have other surrounding communities around your municipality that you service, you need to indicate those as well. Otherwise, we get into a back and forth of, can you please also include this municipality and this one and this one? And so that slows down your operation. And so those requests come in through the voter registry unit, and basically the criteria is passed along to me, and I perform the data extract and pass it back to Margie and Judy, and they can provide the data in whatever format it is that the municipality is comfortable in using, whether it's a soft version such as an Excel spreadsheet or a printed version. I guess you guys can work that out with either Margie or Judy. And so soft versions, we use the provincial government's managed file transfer process, which is basically just a secure file transfer software. You receive an email with a link, you click on the link, and you're able to securely download the information. And that's it on it's very basic. You connect with us. As I mentioned, Judy and Margie have been doing this now for quite a while, and we're at the point now where even just as we were starting up this morning, I was in the process of, I think I did Springdale this morning, Peterview, and a couple of larger ones, Portugal Cove, St. Philip's, Mount Pearl, Conception Bay South. So those should be on their way either today or tomorrow, but we're in the process now of getting those lists out. And once we receive the request, we can fulfill the request within a day, as long as everything is up to date. There's no back and forth on the ISA and no other questions in terms of clarification or what have you. We can fulfill those within a day. So obviously, when we're providing reams of personal information, there's obviously a requirement on both ends. We want to make sure that we're only providing you with the information, the minimal information that's required on your behalf that will allow you to facilitate your election, and also whatever the criteria that we're allowed to share is laid out in the ISA, which includes name, addresses, elector ID, and I'll speak to the elector ID shortly, which is something that you would likely haven't received before, but all lists will be provided with that piece of data going forward, and that's included in the ISA as well as a piece of information that we're able to share. So, as I mentioned at the start, personal information on the list can only be used for electoral purposes. So, and I guess Sean might get into this a little deeper further down the road, but we're under the understanding in the information sharing agreement that the information we're providing you is for the election, for your voter lists, and not for any other purpose. So regardless of your role in the election process, if you're the individual receiving the list, you're responsible for that voters list in terms of how it's used within your organization and the distribution of it going forward. And we'd expect that you ensure all reasonable steps are taken to secure the personal information. So these would probably be in line with whatever you have in your current municipal environment right now, and whether it's locked cabinets and only authorized personnel accessing the information. So this information would fall in line with some of your current security protocols. The next point, when I talk about making copies or circulating copies of the list is not permitted, obviously the Municipal Elections Act allows for copies of the list to be provided to candidates who complete the nomination process. So that's obviously making copies or circulating them falls outside anything that's not permitted by law. So you can't make a copy, a convenience copy, say, just in case you're fearful that you may have lost the original, or you may lose the original or misplace it or something. So that's kind of what I'm talking about there. And we'd ask that when you're finished using the list that you destroy or dispose of any copies that are provided. And I'd ask that confirmation be forwarded to me of that process. At the end of the day, we're just trying to, because we are circulating or distributing personal information, we're just trying to control any sort of, put in place any contingency for unauthorized distribution or unauthorized access of the personal information. So actually, before we move to the data quality, just to speak to about the elector ID field. During election 21, the provincial general election, we obviously ran into some issues with the COVID-19 pandemic and had to quickly pivot. The CEO decided to pivot to a complete mail-in ballot solution for the provincial election. And so at that time, obviously, in order for us to have been able to facilitate that, we had to move to a solution that was web distributed and would allow us to physically distance while employing a large number of people to allow us to process all of the special ballots. And in doing so, we ended up going with DataFix, who you've no doubt heard the name before. But as an electoral management body, provincial electoral management body, we've been aware of DataFix for many years now. We actually had them here in the province a few years back, making a presentation to us. And, at the time we opted to continue on using our internal applications that we created and were serving as well at the time, minus, any of that overhead cost that DataFix charges. However, since moving to DataFix, it's been tremendous in terms of how quickly they can get you to a higher point of accuracy with your list. I mean, we could get there as well. It's just they have a full dedicated team of developers and information managers that's all they do, as opposed to myself, who will probably be, doing my voter registry work. I'm also the ATIP coordinator. I'm also, I manage the website, so all that where to vote application, everything you see online, I manage all that, develop all that, all the graphics and design work out of our office, I do that as well. So, to have a dedicated team to be able to work on data quality has been absolutely game changing for us. So we're really looking forward moving ahead with DataFix. And they obviously they do, one part of it is your voter list quality. However, other add-ons that they have as well are the ability for an elector to go online into a web portal and review their own personal information and update it where necessary. So that's something we're looking at, along with some other things that DataFix provides as well. So we contracted DataFix. Our data cleanup began shortly after 21 GE. And so just last week on Friday, DataFix completed a significant upgrade of our list accuracy, which took us up about 15 points, going from 78 to 93%. And our urban accuracy, which is important for some of you larger groups that are going to be using DataFix, we're virtually at that magic 95% mark, which when you get to 95%, Canada Post actually gives you a rebate on your products. So for for a municipality that may not, you may not see much of a savings, but when you're producing material at the volume that the province does, that we do, it adds up. So that's something that, we're really impressed with and pleased with. And obviously that amount of accuracy is going to be reflected in your list that you're receiving from us as well. And one thing I did want to note here was that due to the timing of the election, we weren't able to integrate any of the updates that we would have received during the advance vote. So if you would have walked into an advance poll in February and voted, and you either moved or had a name change, or something was, you needed something updated with your elector record as it appeared on the voters list, we haven't had the opportunity yet to open the election materials, just due to a couple of issues. One of them being obviously the timeline, and some court challenges that you've probably heard of as well. So yeah, that's it for me in terms of what we expect for the municipality to do in terms of protecting the quality, the integrity of the list, how to get a list, and obviously when you get the list, what it's going to look like.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Chris. So we know that everybody is checking the Municipal Elections Act pretty religiously these days, but there's the other one, and this is where we're going to get Sean to focus for us now. Sean, ATIPA, tell us all.
Sure. So thanks for inviting me to take part in this today, and thanks for everyone for joining. And so I just want to start off by saying many of you probably have either heard of or have had some interaction with ATIPA, or perhaps with our office in relation to access to information requests. And so this is a little glimpse, I guess, into the other side of the act, which is the protection of privacy part. So I'll ask you to just move to the next slide, Kathleen. So our office is, for those of you who haven't had any interaction with us, the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner oversees compliance with the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act, otherwise known as the ATIPA 2015. And so, while we are the body that, if someone files an access to information request, and the individual to a municipality, for example, which is a public body subject to the act, if they don't get the information they're seeking, they have a right to come to us and file a complaint. But members of the public also have the right to file a complaint if they think a public body, including a municipality, has not protected their personal information adequately, or has collected, used, or disclosed it in a way that's contrary to the act. So those are what we would call privacy complaints. And we do receive those, and like all complaints, we do try to resolve them informally, and we succeed in that for the most part. But before we get into dealing with complaints, our biggest interest, and one of our big things that we make an effort on, is reaching out to public bodies so that they know we're here and we can help them, ideally with any questions they have, and we can help avoid the possibility of any complaints in the future. And that's what we're most interested in. We rather help people in advance rather than deal with complaints down the road. So that's part of why I'm here today, is to just talk about the little aspect of elections that does bring privacy into play. So as is indicated there on the slide, we're in the picture because names and addresses in a voter's list are personal information as defined in ATIPA 2015, the law that we're talking about here. So that means that a public body that has that information is obligated to protect it. And Chris did a great job in terms of the information sharing agreement and describing the obligations that municipalities have. If you comply with those obligations, you're in a very good place as well in terms of ATIPA, because those are the types of things that the Access to Information Protection and Privacy Act would also require. in addition to you have to comply with the ATIPA, of course, but as mentioned there, if you comply with Election NL's privacy and security requirements, if you're depending on them to provide you with your voters list, then you should be in good position. So you can move on, Kathleen, to the next one. So one of the things that's been discussed a little bit is the accuracy of the voters list. And Chris has just described how they've engaged a contractor to help them with that. And they've gotten their voters lists up to into the mid 90% sort of accuracy range, or low to mid 90% accuracy range, which is considered to be, very close to as good as you can get. So if you're working from Chris's list, if you get your voters list from Elections NL, the accuracy of the voters list hopefully won't be a major concern. I know the city of St. John's does focus on the accuracy of the list a fair bit. They give a fair bit of thought to that. And I just would like to draw your attention to one distinction. The city of St. John's, in implementing its mail-in voting program, its mail-in voting program is basically its entire election. So they mail out a voting kit to everyone on their voters list automatically. So it's not sort of an option, it is how they carry out their election. So to the city of St. John's, it's extremely important that they have an accurate voters list. If your municipality is considering mail-in voting as an option, so that people can apply to vote by mail, then, at the time of someone applying to vote by mail, that would be an opportunity then to check to see that they're on the voters list, and to make arrangements to get them on there if they're not. So the accuracy of the list, if you're using mail-in voting as another option, but you're not sort of replacing your entire electoral process with mail-in voting and eliminating in-person voting, then the accuracy issue hopefully won't be as big a concern. However, I do mention a couple of points here on this slide. So as noted earlier in the presentation, municipalities can prepare their own voters list. You're allowed to conduct an enumeration. You can use if you have an old list that you want to use again, and you want to use other information to augment it. From an ATIPA standpoint, we're saying that should be something that should be done by consent. And the example that is easy to point to is when you pay your taxes, your income tax every year, on that form, there's an option to check a box and opt into Election Canada's voters list. So if you have an interaction with your citizens, whether it's them paying their taxes or things like that, you could always consider providing that option to them to opt in, so that they can use that information so that you can use that information to update or augment the accuracy of the voters list. That's a call that you'll have to make as a municipality. But if you want to do that, we're saying that allowing people to join the list by consent, by opting in, is the way to go, as opposed to going through other databases that your municipality may have and just sort of pulling data from that and adding it to your voters list. Because ultimately, and the Act is clear as well, that in cases such as this, it's really appropriate that you collect information directly from an individual, as opposed to going into databases that you may have access to and pulling information from it. I guess the idea behind that is being on a voters list is a choice. So people sometimes have reasons why they might not want to be on a voters list, that especially one that has to be distributed to candidates during election campaigns. And there is a great example out there happening in Canada right now, which sort of illustrates that. And I've sort of topped it off with the comment you sometimes hear: isn't a voters list just like phone book information? Well, it is and it isn't. It is, I guess, in a sense that it's your name and address, but even a phone book, people have unlisted numbers. These days, not a lot of people have landlines anymore anyways, but even if you do, and if you're in the phone book, you can certainly opt to have your name taken out. And so this is something that I believe, Chris, you is allowed at the provincial level. You can contact Elections NL and ask to have your name removed from the voters list.
That's right. Yep.
Yep. So I would certainly encourage municipalities to offer that as well. If someone contacts your municipality and says, look, I just really would not like to have my name distributed, then this is something that should be an option as well. And in this case, this news article that came out, and you can look up some more, I think there's probably been some other news articles about this as well. This is basically a guy who's running for mayor in Calgary, and he's threatened healthcare workers. He doesn't believe in the pandemic, I think, or doesn't believe in COVID-19 or something. And he's threatened healthcare workers with violence, basically. And he wants to literally track them down and hurt them. And so he's running for mayor. So he gets all the names and addresses of all the voters and where they live. And there's a real fear that he is going to use that information not only as a candidate in the election, but to actually track down these people. And there's actually a fear out there that this is a real concern. So you can have a Google about this and see what's happening in Calgary lately. But this is a kind of a problem hopefully we'll never have here in Newfoundland, but I guess it's sort of the cartoon version of how bad it could possibly get. And it's just an example to bear in mind that although the information, a name and address, seems fairly innocuous, there are reasons sometimes why someone might not want to have their name and address out there, or it's not that it's even out there, because Chris has pointed out you do have to maintain it securely. However, you may have to distribute it to candidates who are running for election, and they may have campaign workers who are helping them and things of that nature. And there are always people, whether it's for spousal abuse, or there's other reasons why people don't want to have their name and address out there as well. So it's something I just want to highlight to you and remind you that it's something to consider, and to ensure that people have that option should they request it, to have their name removed from the voters list. And another option that could be considered, if there is any concern, is that you might consider asking candidates, when you provide them with a copy of the voters list, to sign something saying that when the election is over, they're going to destroy the voters list or return it to you at the municipality, and you can destroy it there. So those are just a couple of ideas of ways you could deal with that kind of situation. But as I say, beyond that situation itself, there's still a requirement for municipalities to keep this information securely. And again, as I mentioned, the information sharing agreement that will be provided by Elections NL, should you use their voters list, is certainly a good standard to go by. And I guess that's all I have to say, unless there's any questions. And also, I will also throw out there, as I take the opportunity anytime I can, that we are happy to give presentations to any municipality, whether it be staff or council, about any aspect of the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And I'm also happy to take calls or emails from anyone who has questions about anything that I've said today.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Sean. So we'll go to questions now straight away, but I'll just give you one final reminder to keep checking back to the MNL municipal elections page on our website. We'll be uploading this video there to be able to watch alongside of the other tape that we have archived there already. But moreover, we'll also be posting updates and links, and even things like our schedule now are going to be harmonized with the materials that Municipal Affairs has just released. So how are we doing on the questions chat?
We have one question in the chat right now, and for anyone else, you can certainly use the chat function, or you can raise your hand with the raise hand function down there on the bottom, and we'll certainly recognize you and get you to ask your question. Kathleen, can you see that one in the chat there?
I can see one from Claudine. Are we expected to ask for the voter list back from candidates as well as our own? He said to send confirmation, but the list was destroyed. So Sean, I think that's
Yeah,
picking up
I mean,
on your point.
It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's a suggestion on my part that if you want to eliminate any level of risk about the list sort of getting out there in the community, that might be a good practice to ask for it back or ask that it be destroyed. But this is something that you would have to do at the time you distribute it to the candidate.
And Jeanette asks, are candidates allowed to make copies for their campaign staff?
Chris, is that something that your ISA deals with?
No, and I responded there. I said that there's nothing in law prohibiting them from doing so, and it's a common practice that would be difficult to limit. So,
yeah,
you know, it's normally when we provide the list, whoever receives it certifies that they will, you know, will use the list basically in good faith and the purpose for what it's used for. But also, our certificate talks about the fact that it's supposed to be destroyed, and a notification or a confirmation of that destruction is supposed to be provided to me. However, like I said before this started, when we were just chatting, is that I've only received one from, and that certificate also gives a timeline as to when we would expect that to happen by. And I only received one from one of the 100 and I don't know how many candidates there were, 130 odd, I think. But like I said, there's nothing in law that would prohibit a candidate or a party from making copies. And listen, it's common knowledge that at the provincial level that parties employ you know, statisticians and data managers to take that list and splice it and split it up into, you know, 100 different views so that they know where to target and what to areas of a district that they need to focus on in order to get their vote out. So at this point in time, there's nothing, like I say, in law that would prohibit them from doing so.
And
not from an elections law perspective anyway.
Yeah, and I would just add, Chris, I mean, you know, the candidates are entitled to access the lists under the statute. So, you know, and nothing in the Elections Act, you know, says that they can't make a copy for that purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and there's nothing in a tip. I mean, once it leaves the control or custody of a municipality and it's in the possession of the individual for that purpose of running the election, is difficult for the municipality to enforce anything.
Yes.
That being said, you know, as I said earlier regarding the idea of asking candidates to sort of commit to destroying or returning the list, it could say, you know, destroy or return all copies of the list as well. And even if it's something that a municipality is not able to enforce very well, it's still something that there's a little bit of at least an expectation created that somebody's committing to doing something, and that may be better than nothing.
And probably what we're trying to discern here is what's law, you know, law versus best practice, or you know, common sense, or you know. So just because it's not in law doesn't mean it's not correct.
That's right.
We have a question from Kara Hutchison. Kara, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hi everybody. So the biggest challenge we have every year is the voters list. We use the list provided by Elections NL, and we don't usually make any changes. We leave the changes made by Elections NL based on their ISA with vital statistics and the returns of the oath of affirmations of voters. However, we noticed on the list that there are people that had moved away several years ago. So if we edit the list this year, based on what we do know, should we keep a list and submit it to Elections NL? Otherwise, every 4 years, we're in the same boat.
Oh, yes, no, we would rely on updates at the municipal level for sure. And I didn't get to speak to the I was going to come back to the elector ID, and really the elector ID will probably mostly apply to those municipalities that are going to be employing DataFix. So DataFix will be able to take our elector ID, which is associated with a particular elector record, and either match or update, on based on information received from, say, St. John's or Corner Brook or whoever else is using that information. So, but yes, we would really appreciate any updates that, and I believe that there's a form that the municipalities use at the polls for either updates or adds to the list that
That's the voter affirmation of voter. That's what the voter fills out for changes that they are allowing
yeah.
for an update.
So when we get those back from the municipalities, we certainly integrate those into our data.
It's the reverse of the actual oath, the P6A, that is actually part of the materials that Municipal Affairs just sent out last night in the prescribed forms. So if you want to have a look at that one in particular, you'll find it in that deck.
All right, thank you.
If we are in level 4, we can't have in person. This is a question from Triffy Parsons. Triffy, at this stage in the game, what we know is that under alert levels 4 and 5, you're extremely restricted, and people may very well be, told not to be moving around. So of course, gatherings would be problematic, even if you could have suitable physical distancing and manage sanitation practices. We'll be seeking health guidance a little bit closer to election date, because of course we've got circumstances right now with variants active in the province, and we don't know what the implications are for potential breakthrough relative to vaccines at this stage in the game. So there are some things that we can't really answer without consultations with public health officials. But in general, the reason we're pushing vote by mail is that you prevent the huge reliance on in-person voting and on a very large gathering of people in that particular context, because you have a voting period that allows a lot of people on your list to actually vote well in advance of election day.
Don't say nothing, I'm on mute. Can I add on to that?
Yes, please.
Because we're a very small municipality, and the way our building is set up is like you walk in one door, you walk out the other. You're not having 20 or 30 people show up at one time. We're lucky if we get 1 or 2 at a time. So the additional expense to do mail-in voting procedure doesn't justify it when the way we are set up, we could do it. So does it basically what I'm getting from this is we must ask for the approval for the mail-in voting.
We are strongly recommending, and the department is also recommending, that all towns be considering vote by mail. It is the one fallback option that you have under the Municipal Elections Act. And we're doing our best to streamline and provide information to make it as easy for municipalities to move into that space. You don't need to engage DataFix in Indian Bay. There are a lot of ways that you can save money in terms of how you choose to distribute your ballots and have them returned, that don't need to engage even Canada Post. So we can perhaps talk about that later. I'll try and keep us to the voters list, because we'll really want to get through the remaining questions there. There's a question from Jenna, just speaking to the sample template for the vote by mail procedures and policies. Yes, Jenna, there will be a template available from MNL very soon. We very likely will have another one of these webinars specifically to go through that guidance material once we have it cleared with the Department of Municipal and Provincial Affairs. Nadine, are you able to unmute and maybe answer or ask your question?
Hello.
Hi. We can hear you.
So I was just wondering, between Chris's and Sean's presentations, I'll kind of get a little bit of a crossover. On the one side, the person that is receiving the voters list is responsible for the, I guess, the containment and ultimately responsible for the destruction or return of it. And then through Sean's presentation, I heard that under ATIP, like it is personal information of people, but candidates get copies of it and they might give it out to their, I guess, employees or people supporting them in the election. So, I'm a little bit concerned about taking on that responsibility through Elections NL when I'm distributing it to people and I don't know how they're going to control it.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't control that. So all you can do is control what it is that you've signed on to the ISA to do, which is to receive the list and ensure that all of those clauses in that list are met. No one could have foreseen, let's say, what the example Sean's shown with the individual in Calgary. So I mean, as long as you're aware of what's required of you and your municipality in the ISA, that's really all you can control at that point.
And I'll just echo that, what Chris's comment. So I think what we're talking about is making sure that you are taking care of the information that's in your municipality's control or custody. So once you give that information, I mean, the candidates are entitled to receive the voters list. Once you give that to them, they're responsible for what they do with. I don't think you can make them do anything with it. My suggestion was to ask them to commit to destroying or returning the voters list after they're finished with it. But that's more of as Chris mentioned earlier, that's the difference between a legal requirement and a recommendation. That's something I would suggest would be a good practice to reduce any risks associated with the voters list sort of getting away from people who are candidates. But it's not something you can enforce, and it's not something that anyone would be coming back to you about if you give a copy of the voters list to a candidate and they do something with it.
And Kelly mentioned in the chat there, she says that before candidates can get a copy of the voters list, they must sign, I guess it's a municipal form, MEF 10. It states that they will not unlawfully disseminate the voters list. So obviously, that would be part of, I guess, your duties would be to ensure that form is signed. There's Kathleen has it.
Yeah, absolutely. Check that deck of materials from MAPA. And actually, Jeanette Murphy had asked a similar question, was wondering if there was any kind of a waiver. Perhaps there could be an additional template that we could even develop to add to the deck of materials that could be handed on as a resource to candidates to have their staff also sign. So we've got a kind of equivalent layer of understanding, spreading throughout the organization of the campaigns as well.
So in the chat,
sorry. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, just to follow up on, stay on top of the chat there, Kathy mentions that we also use the DataFix software for updating our list. I don't know what municipality you are, but so, and then she asks, so are you recommending we get the ENL list and update in DataFix ourselves, or will DataFix merge both with the most updated info for our area? So this is where the elector ID will come in. So any updates that you would receive and would integrate into that list that we provided you, and then send that back to us, then obviously we would provide that to DataFix and they would update the records on our end. So they won't be able to update individual records from data that you've collected out there. So it's kind of a long way around to the same thing. However, that's just the way that it has to work. So basically what'll happen is you'll update your list with any changes that you've captured and provide that back to us. And then we would work with DataFix to integrate those changes into our data set. Just because DataFix is, we're clients of DataFix and your clients of DataFix, they still have an obligation to handle the two data sets separately. So I know that's kind of confusing, but it is what it is. Oh, Lab City, okay.
Thanks for that, Kathy. Any other thoughts, questions, folks?
The only data updates that we receive, because the voters list is a voluntary list, so unless you contact us directly to have your name added to the list, then that's the primary and only source, really. We can update data based on other data sources, such as municipal information or federal information, but in order to get added to the list, you have to contact us directly and be added in that regard. We can't just pull data from another government data source, such as motor vehicles or MCP or something. So that's one thing to remember, is that the provincial voters list is a voluntary list at this time. We just went through an exercise last week where we applied, I believe, just under 2,100 struck or removed 2,100 deceased individuals from our list. So our deceased records are up to date as of Friday. And also we do legal name changes as well. So it may be someone has identified a new gender or a married name, or someone has changed their name completely, or we also integrate those as well.
So I just put the link to MAPA's freshened page with all of the election materials and guidance documents on it in the chat. So if you want to grab that quickly, I know there is some concern people haven't seen a message as yet. My understanding was it was sent out about 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon to everybody. Don't know. Show of hands. Who got a message from MAPA already? Scanning a lot. Oh, see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so definitely a message made its way out. Well, I think we may very well have answered most people's questions. How do you like that? If anybody has any further questions, one last one.
Yeah, so I just copied and pasted a reply from another person who asked the same thing. I would at this point just either email Margie Kennedy or Judy Lockyer, the 2 voter registry coordinators with Elections NL, and they'll certainly put you on the right path.
Excellent. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I'll just, I guess, say a big thank you to our 2 presenters today. Thank you so much, Sean, for helping us through all the interpretation around the ATIPA applications to our elections in the fall. And Chris, thank you so much too, and pass along thanks to Judy and Margie for all the work you're going to be doing in support of getting voters lists to communities right across this province. And those accuracy rates are fabulous. That really does respond, I think, to the concerns I know I've heard out there from a number of communities about list accuracy and making sure the right names are there to start with. So wonderful. Thank you, everybody. We'll have this one up on the site as soon as we possibly can.